The Urban League of San Diego County is on the front line of education and youth development, empowering workforce, housing, and financial development. We provide community health and wellness opportunities and civil rights and civic engagement. Welcome to the Urban League Today with hosts Abdallah and Herman Collins.
Proposition 209 passed in 1996 prohibited University of California and other state entities from using race, ethnicity, or sex as criteria in public employment, public contracting, and public education. Welcome to the Urban League Today's discussion on the effects of affirmative action. Affirmative action policies are affirmative steps to attract and retain underrepresented populations for educational, employment, and civic opportunities, and establish policies for fair evaluation of candidates based on non-biased criteria. Affirmative action policies are aimed at eliminating a disadvantage, not creating one. National Urban League President Mark Morial stated this. Without clear and specific guidelines such as those outlined in affirmative action policies, we know that institutions fall back into discriminatory and exclusionary patterns. Banning affirmative action is an endorsement of discrimination, not an elimination of it. Founded in 1911 in New York City, the National Urban League is one of 5 civil rights organizations collectively known as the Big Five. The organization was founded to provide assistance to African Americans to further the dual tenets of economic and social justice. My name is Abdallah, President and CEO of the Urban League of San Diego County. I am joined here today by my co-host, Herman Collins, who functions as a public affairs consultant to the Urban League of San Diego County. Herman, please tee up this conversation and introduce our panelists for today.
Thank you, Al, and welcome to our viewing audience. Today we have a distinguished panel of jurists, influencers, and stakeholders. Judge Randall Trapp was elected to serve 2 terms on the court's executive committee and was elevated to assistant supervising judge and then supervising judge of the civil division. She presided over more than 100 civil jury trials, and prior to her ascending to the bench, Judge Trapp was active as a practicing attorney in San Diego, with an activist role in the broader San Diego community through the Earl B. Gilliam Bar Association, NAACP, and Southeastern Economic Development Corporation, and various others. Judge Trapp is a product of the Southeastern San Diego community, a proud alumnus of Lincoln High School. Randa McDaniel is no stranger to most native San Diegans, and I am pleased she accepted the invitation to participate with us today. Attorney Daniel Eaton is a shareholder in the firm Seltzer Kaplan. He's in the litigation department and practices employment law. Attorney Eaton found his way to San Diego as a highly desired recruit of the law firm Gray Carey Ware. Mr. Eaton received his Bachelor of Science from Georgetown University in 1984 and his law degree cum laude from Harvard School of Law in 1989. Many of you have seen Attorney Eaton on various news sources as a commentator on legal issues often involving the courts. Unbeknownst to many, Mr. Eaton is an exceptional tenor and a person who has been involved in numerous issues affecting the local African American diaspora since his arrival in San Diego. Judge Trapp, Attorney Eaton, welcome to the Urban League today.
Thank you very much.
Good to be with you.
There's been a 27-year attack on affirmative action. Some would say starting with California's Proposition 209, which passed in 1996, prohibiting the University of California and other state entities from using race, ethnicity, or sex as criteria in public employment. Public contracting and public education have been affected drastically. Since that time, there has been a number of research articles written and analysis conducted to better understand the impact of this law in California. There are several research articles and data to examine on the impact of Prop 209. However, today, we'd like to center our discussion on 3 basic questions. Today's discussion will examine what have been the effects of affirmative action in education, housing, and employment? What will change as a result of the recent Supreme Court ruling? What, if anything, should communities do to enhance diversity? Panel, please feel free to crosstalk today, but we're going to start with our first question. Can each of you take about 2 minutes and share your thoughts about affirmative action? And let's start with Judge Trapp.
Thank you, Herman. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. I am the product of affirmative action. Graduating from Lincoln High School, and you mentioned that I am a very proud graduate, Hornet for life. I went to USC, and were it not for affirmative action, I don't believe that space would have been made for me. Now, I want to be clear. I was more than qualified to be there. But without that, without the law, having people be mindful of the fact that affirmative action is important, that diversity is important for the betterment of the nation, I do not believe that there would have been space for me. So as a product of affirmative action, I was very sad to see it go away, at least in this current state. And I'm sure that we're going to talk more about it. But for now, that's all I wanted to share about it.
Attorney Eaton.
Thank you. Well, let's level set a little bit before talking about my own views about affirmative action. The challenge to affirmative action dates back actually 45 years, and it is California, just like Prop 209 was with the Bakke decision, which challenged the admission of the University of California in Los Angeles Medical School by a gentleman by the name of Alan Bakke. So we actually have a very long history of challenges to affirmative action, which after all, so we have a common definition here, is about giving an additional edge in order to level the playing field that was uneven as a result of years, decades, centuries, if you want to be completely honest, of impediments that were given to African Americans, sometimes as a matter of law, sometimes as a matter of custom, but always with the real effect of holding us back. It was Lyndon Johnson, President Johnson said, this is paraphrasing, you can't remove the shackles of someone who's been shackled for a long time and put him at the starting line and expect him to be able to run as competitively as those who have not been so encumbered. So all of that being said, with respect to level setting the issue, yeah, affirmative action has been very important to my life, for sure. When I was admitted to Georgetown undergraduate, I was admitted to what was called a community scholar. And so I was given access to certain resources that obviously enabled me to succeed. Then of course, I went on to serve for a U.S. senator, and then eventually I went to Harvard Law School, did very well there, and came out here. But at each point, I have to believe that the unique value that came with my lived experience of being an African American male made a difference. And it certainly has made a difference in the way I have received the world and contributed to it in America's finest city.
Thank you. While the recent United States Supreme Court ruling was focused on higher education in colleges and universities, everyday Black people report inequality in employment, housing, access to capital, or the quality of public education, all of which can affect one's prerequisite for a college degree. Attorney Eaton, did the court consider any of these matters in its decision, and if not, why?
When you say, did the court consider it, it depends on how you define court. Because on the one hand, you have the majority decision, of course, of 6 justices, with the decision being written by Chief Justice John Roberts. And then you have the 3 dissenters who took a very different view. The 3 dissenters consisting of Sotomayor, Kagan, and of course the newest justice, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. herself, incidentally, a product of Harvard. The dissenters who disagreed with the court's ruling that said affirmative action was unconstitutional and also violated Title VI, the federal law that prohibits the use of race in connection with programs that receive federal funds. The dissenters took a broad view and did take into account the history in all of its facets, as your very incisive question suggested. The majority ruling really focused very specifically and targeted the specific language of the Equal Protection Clause and Title VI, and said basically that affirmative action had to fall for three reasons. In education, in higher education, had to fall for three reasons. One, that the goals that they were talking about were not measurable, which is to suggest training future leaders and so forth. Two, that there was no apparent end in sight, and so there was no measurable cutoff date to the kinds of goals that affirmative action in higher education were designed to fulfill. And three, the majority, per Chief Justice Roberts, said affirmative action engages in a kind of stereotyping, assuming that all Blacks contribute in the same way, and also because higher education admissions zero-sum game results in negative weight being given to certain other races. And that, said Chief Justice Roberts, you cannot do consistent with the 14th Amendment clause requiring equal protection and Title VI prohibiting the use of race in connection with programs that receive federal funds.
Great. Judge Trapp, I want to kind of digress a little bit. Many often think that conservatives have opposed affirmative action from day one. However, while the Johnson administration created the basis for affirmative action, it really wasn't put in place in the federal government until Executive Order 11246 was enacted by the Nixon administration. Is affirmative action that important to today's world? And should we be considering other things?
Well, I do think it's important because our society doesn't offer equal opportunities to everybody. And that was, the end goal of affirmative action is to level the playing field. And I personally don't believe that it is level yet. So whether you want to call it affirmative action or come up with some other type of program, there still needs to be some intervention, because left to their own design, people are going to do what comes natural to them. And that's not always, or it doesn't always lead to a world that is, or a country, I should say, speaking of the United States, where we have equal access to education.
Attorney Eden, I'm going to let you take an opportunity to answer that same question. Is affirmative action necessary?
I really want to follow up on what the judge said, because she said something very important, which takes a broader scope than just higher education. When you say it was necessary, I don't think we can limit this discussion to higher education, important though that is. But it's important to understand that in a concurring opinion by Justice Neil Gorsuch, who, of course, was Donald Trump's first appointee to the Supreme Court, which is joined by Clarence Thomas, one of two Black members of the court, he said, well, if it's not allowed in higher education, it's also not allowed with respect to employment under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which uses nearly identical language. So the concern here is that, and I don't disagree with what the judge said with respect to the ongoing need for this consideration of diversity. The concern is that this is just the first stop, and that there are going to be further efforts to remove this tool, even as I think that the universities and employers and so forth are going to try to continue to advance the goal of a diverse of a diverse workforce, of a diverse school community. I also teach at San Diego State, so I recognize the need for that. All of the service of creating this rich diversity that does add so much to all of our lives when we are in community in whatever form, whether it's higher education, employment, government, what have you.
Thank you, Attorney. The case brought before the Supreme Court dealt with admissions at Harvard that adversely affected Asian American students. However, many pundits have said legacy enrollments have a greater effect on who gets privileged into access to higher education than any other enrollment practice. Do either of you have an opinion on legacy enrollments at Harvard or any other school?
Well, I'm not adverse to legacy enrollments. I think some of us have, reached the point where our offspring will be legacy. So I don't have a problem with that. But my concern is that we also keep the door open and provide assistance to those who need just that opportunity to attend any institution, not just Harvard. So yes, you can have your legacies. I'm fine with that. But there also needs to be some accommodations made or some recognition that that diversity is important. Not just diversity in terms of race and ethnicity, but diversity of thought. If you've got everybody sitting around the table and they're all the same, there's not much creativity there.
Well, and I just want to add to follow on. I mean, for goodness sakes, as the judge knows, I don't think you can find two African Americans with more diverse thought than the two of us. So the idea that you have monolithic thought in the Black community is belied by the very panel that you have assembled here today. But I just want to reinforce that important point that the judge made, and also to reinforce the idea that you do get a rich diversity when you bring in a broad range of voices, even within a single identified group, whether it's African American or what have you. With respect to the specific question of legacy, I think there is a value to legacy admissions, as long as it's not used in a pernicious way to exclude, but rather to include. That is to say, to allow an extension of the ties that were established by older generations with younger generations to particular institutions. That, in its finest form, in its purest form, in its most benevolent form, is what legacy admission is all about. And that's a good thing because it ties families to the institutions that have benefited them so richly. And the argument is that no one knows more about the benefits of a particular institution than a parent. And sending their child there enables that child to benefit from the same kinds of experience that the parent had that presumably influenced the raising of the child.
Not to mention the contributions that if my kids are a legacy at Morehouse, they're going to get more money from me.
Okay. Thank you both.
I have a personal relationship with affirmative action. I attended a small private university in rural Southwest Oregon, Pacific University. I attended under a scholarship program with the United Church of Christ, which was championed by Dr. Ben Chavis Sr. My campus was populated by generations of Folgers, DuPonts, et al., and considers itself a social mobility campus environment. Can either of you share the benefits of social mobility in your professional lives and how that has been impacted by the university experience?
Well, I wouldn't be there without it, right? My own background, my parents were from East Texas, and my father made it to the 3rd grade before he had to quit school and go and work in the cotton fields to help support his family. My mother was fortunate enough to go all the way to the 11th grade, but they moved to California, thank God, and made a wonderful life for themselves. They even bought a home in National City, and I'm so proud of them. And but me having the opportunity to go to university and then on to law school, um, is I don't know that I would be where I am now, and that my children would have the opportunities that they have were it not for the opportunities that were afforded to me. And again, that goes back to affirmative action, uh, providing a space for me at university.
Well, as the judge's comments and your very incisive question, Herm suggested, is that education is transformational. It always is. My background is very different from the judge's. My mother attended university, but she never graduated. My father, by contrast, he holds advanced degrees. He was a concert pianist. He studied at Yale, and he became the first African American madman. He was the first creative vice president on a major Madison Avenue advertising agency. So I, in the broader scheme of things, had a relatively privileged background. My mother's father was a doctor who worked with Charles Drew. All of that said, even with all of the advantages that I had, the common denominator between the judge and me is this idea of being inculcated with the importance of education. And that has absolutely set me, I'll just speak for myself, set me on the trajectory that I have had, and has enabled me to make the contributions I have had to this wonderful community we all call home in San Diego. I know that I have been better as a result of the educational experiences I have had, including my experience at Harvard Law School. And I like to think that I have in turn given back to a certain measure, as the judge did with her exceptional service on the bench, to the community as well. But it does all come back to recognizing the importance and the value of education and the amazing exponential and multifaceted contributions that arise directly from that one thing, the quality and the caliber of the education and what it enables you to do, and making a contribution and making sure that you can do the most with this limited time that we are all blessed to have on earth.
I will kind of expand upon that a little bit, and as we move towards our next question. When we often think of pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps, it's fine, but oftentimes people say, well, what happens if you don't have boots? At this university, I was exposed to a lot of different situations that I had not had coming from San Diego. I had not understood the issues of just blatant racism and how to deal with it in my face. I had not understood that there were conscious people who were white that just wanted to help me. I did not always understand that fighting for injustice wasn't always something that I needed to do in a direct role, but there were many passive roles that I could do to accomplish. I guess what I'm asking now is that without affirmative action, will the Black community continue to thrive?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no question in my mind. You talked about your school started by the United Church of Christ. They were also responsible for, a lot of our historically Black colleges and universities. And so we taught ourselves. That my father making it to the third grade, that was, a segregated school taught by, a Black school taught by Black teachers, administered by Black administrators. So yes, we will thrive. But the point is because of the injustices that were visited upon us as a people, slavery to be exact, and having this country built on our backs, we are owed opportunities, and the very least, to have the foot taken off of our neck so that we can thrive. And as I said before, left to their own devices, human beings are going to do what comes natural to them. And for some of them, what comes natural is keeping that foot on our neck, thinking that if we thrive, it means it takes away from them.
Exactly.
So that's why, you can't legislate people's hearts, as been said. And that's why we need laws to make sure that playing field remains level and we have equal opportunity. But yes, we're going to be okay. If we can't get into Harvard, Yale, Georgetown, there's Georgetown, Spelman, Howard, and the list goes on and on.
Well, but to the judge's point, and this is an important point, let's just state a few brute realities, okay? You are going to see admission to elite schools drop, whether you're talking about the public sphere or you're talking about the private sphere, just as we saw in the immediate aftermath, anyway, of 2009. And yet, in preparing for this segment, I came across an article published on abcnews.com on October 24th, 2023, that, to the judge's point about Spelman, suggests there may be something of a silver lining. It quotes Dr. Michael Lomax, and I'm reading here from the president and CEO of the United Negro College Fund, who says that he was disappointed by the affirmative action ruling, yes, and he says that it'll harm students who want to attend these predominantly white institutions. But then he adds, quote, I think the smart money is on HBCUs. They continue to provide outstanding education for the students who attend them at a lower price, by the way, about a third less than their comparable white institutions. The article then quotes a researcher in higher education, Gabriel Montague, who says HBCUs may absorb a portion of these students who don't get into the elite institutions, but by no means are HBCUs secondary choices. HBCUs produce the most doctors, lawyers, teachers, and other professionals. This was true while affirmative action was in place and will remain so after its downfall. That is an important point to realize. Although I was not a product of an HBCU and neither was the judge, we have to recognize that our heritage is definitely going to enable us to thrive, even as some of our most promising students end up attending different institutions from those they otherwise would, but for this decision.
Well, and I take it a step further. A lot of those, doctors, lawyers, professionals that were some of the finest produced by HBCUs, people went there by choice,
Right.
not because they couldn't get into the Harvards, Yales, and the Georgetowns. I think if I had known more about HBCUs, I'm born and raised in San Diego, and I didn't have that, right? Didn't know much about them. Had I known and made that choice, who knows where I would have been today? I'm blessed and privileged with the career that I've had. But if I had gone to an HBCU and gotten that nurturing and that empowerment, people that believed in me instead of having to, fight to make people understand that I belong there, to be welcomed with open arms and supported and encouraged, who knows where I would be today.
I want to ask this in pretty much closing. One, we want to thank you for participating in the discussion. And we'd like to give you an opportunity, if you have any final commentary that you'd like to add before we close the day's activity.
I'll give the judge the last word, so I'll go first on this one. When I was a first-year Harvard Law student in the spring of 1987, so now 36 years ago, I attended the annual Black Law Students Association annual dinner. I actually have a picture in which then Michelle Robinson was checking people in. Of course, the world knows her as Michelle Obama. At that dinner, Damon Keith of the Sixth Circuit made a statement in his keynote speech that has stuck with me for these last nearly 40 years. And he said that in America, color blindness is a tradition without a past. And I think that's a very important thing to realize as we move forward, as we must, in light of this decision, because the work is not yet done. That said, as the judge suggested in the comment she made just before we went to these closing statements, who knows what remarkable things are going to come out of this ruling. Unwelcome though it is by most of us, we don't know what the future holds. We do know, however, who holds the future. And like so many things that have guided us in our journey in America, we will overcome through the grace of God. I am sure of that.
I couldn't agree more with Danny's comments, and I'm always so proud of him and all that he's achieved. We are a resilient people. We're going to be okay. But the conversation needs to continue because the debt has not been paid. 8 generations of chattel slavery, you just don't close the books on that. So the conversations will continue. But we as a people, we're strong, we're resilient, and we will continue to thrive. Thank you for this opportunity to be with you today.
And thank you.
Thank you both so much. There is considerable interest in the impact of policy alternatives to race-based affirmative action on underrepresented minority university enrollment. Widely implemented alternatives include what are called percent plans, which guarantee admission to top high school students, and holistic review, in which applications are evaluated on a comprehensive set of merits. A 2020 published study by the Office of the President of the University of California, in this study, estimates each policy's percent plans and holistic review on the underrepresented minority enrollment effect at the University of California. Affirmative action increased the annual University of California underrepresented minority enrollment by more than 700 students, or 12%, and by more than 60% at Berkeley and UCLA. 3 years after UC's affirmative action program ended in 1998, UC guaranteed admission to the top 4% of students from each California high school under its eligibility in the local context program. Eligibility in the local context program increased total underrepresented minority enrollment among applicants annually by 250 or 3.5%, and a significant drop, and demonstrating that affirmative action does have a direct impact on the access to higher education. That should not be a surprise. The time is critical to address the many challenges affecting our communities. The Urban League, NAACP, and other legacy civil rights programs need your help. As a volunteer, donor, auxiliary member, or mentor, now is the time to support the continued fight to advance the human cause through action. I would like to thank our panelists today and invite you to tune in soon to additional episodes of the Urban League Today.
This forum, produced since March 2022, has had several discussions: financial education with CTI Bank, COVID with Drs. Rodney Hood and Jerome Robinson, housing stabilization with the San Diego Housing Commission, Black Homebuyers Program with LISC and the San Diego Community Foundation, gang enhancements with Layla Aziz and Jamie Wilson, the shrinking of the GATE program in California with San Diego City Schools' Richard Ibarra, Freedom to Read with Professor Michael Odom and Deborah Barrow, who is the former library director of the City of San Diego. Please check out YouTube and subscribe to the Urban League Today and hear further segments and a continuing program.